And welcome to this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hennig. This week we have a special edition of the podcast for you as we are going to get into depth about the 2018 NFL Draft along with a review of Avengers Infinity War. Joining me for a one-on-one conversation with the college football and NFL analyst Emory Hunt, followed by my 6 biggest takeaways from Avengers Infinity War. And yes, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, you have to listen to the Avengers part at the end. But we got the NFL Draft talk coming up first before we get to the Avengers conversation. So let's start with my one-on-one conversation with Emory Hunt. And welcome into my one-on-one conversation on this week's Mutant Blitz podcast. Emory Hunt, you can follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan. He was down there at the NFL Draft covering it, and he joins me right now. Emory, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you coming on. So before we start diving into like specific players and specific picks, kind of just give me an idea of what was your overall perspective of the draft. Did it seem like things go the way you thought they were, or were there a lot more surprises than you expected?
There were a lot more surprises than I expected. I expected trades, but, just seeing where guys went and how far or how low they went was really surprising. And just the draft itself was, I learned that it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a, I don't know how it plays off on TV, but being down there this year, you kind of saw like what goes on in between commercial breaks, and it just wears on you as a guy that's covering it.
I want to start with the running back position, not just because you played running back in college, but also because it's a position that I don't think got enough coverage. And we all know about Saquon Barkley. The second running back taken was Rashad Penny, a guy that you and I had talked about off and on in the weeks leading up to the draft. And I think for the Seahawks, taking Rashad Penny was definitely a sign to me that they were investing not just in the offense, but investing in a running back position with a player who is a 3-down back.
Exactly, and it showed you that they targeted a specific back that they knew probably wasn't going to be there the next time around when they came back on the clock, which would have been in the 3rd or 4th round, I believe. So they saw it the same way I did. I had Rashad Penny as my number 2 rated tailback behind Saquon Barkley. Not surprised that he went in the 1st round. And it was funny because in my midseason mock draft, I gave Rashad Penny to the Seattle Seahawks. I was like, this is just a good fit. I like his running style, and I think it fits perfectly with what Seattle does from a running game perspective. And I know a lot of people out there that may not understand the position and saying silly stuff like, oh, well, you don't take a running back that high. You got to invest in the offensive line. Well, a talented tailback supersedes an adequate offensive line. So Rashad Penny, Saquon Barkley, those type of guys are the types that can make your offensive line look a lot better than what they are.
Another one of my favorite picks at the running back position in this draft, and I think it gets overlooked, is also Sony Michel going to the Patriots. I really see him taking over that Dion Lewis role with the Patriots, and they drafted Isaiah Wynn. Michel and Wynn were roommates in college, so you're taking 2 guys who know each other very well. You're putting them into an environment like the Patriots. It just seems like a win-win for those guys.
Absolutely, and you saw the theme right there early on with New England, taking guys that are very versatile. Wynn can play guard or tackle. Michel is a dual threat type of a tailback, a guy that does a lot of damage on the ground, but also as a receiver and can also help out in the return game if you want him to. So they value versatility, guys who can do more than one thing, which is why it made sense they went 1 and 2 with Wynn and Michel.
Ronald Jones going to the Bucs just screams Doug Martin replacement. Do you think that's a fair thing to say about Ronald Jones at this point?
Absolutely. You look at that offense now with Deshaun Jackson, Mike Evans, Cameron Brate, O.J. Howard. They drafted Justin Watson out of Penn, a very good receiver. Adam Humphries came on late, and now you toss in a tailback in Ronald Jones. I can envision them running this fast break offense that we used to see Florida State run. A lot of sprint draws, a lot of inside-outside zone, and you get a guy like Ronald Jones, a lane, and he has that speed that can really flip field position or ring that cash register up pretty quickly.
Darius Geis going to the Redskins, to me, I thought was interesting because of the fact they already have Chris Thompson there, and they've had a plethora of other running backs who have played there. How do you see the combination of Geis and Thompson working together in Washington?
Well, I like how Coach Gruden sort of laid it out. He was like, we got Chris Thompson to handle third downs, and we're going to have Geis as our primary tailback. And I think that's a good strategy because when you look at Geis, he proves that he can handle pass receptions or even picking up blitzes and things of that nature where you feel comfortable with him putting them out there. Then you want to have that other guy in there and Chris Thompson. You just hope that Thompson stays healthy. But I like the backfield. What was interesting was being there at the draft. When they drafted Darius Geis, they're running his highlights on the big screen while they're playing Hail to the Redskins. It just made his highlights look that much better. So I think that's the place where it's just the perfect fit for him.
Final running back I want to touch on, and he was one of my favorite running backs going into this draft. I love Royce Freeman going to the Broncos. I think Freeman didn't get enough credit at the college level. I thought he was a guy who could be a dynamic offensive weapon, and for the Broncos, they really haven't had a dynamic running back in a long time.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how they pair up him with another talented tailback in Devontae Booker. Now, they may envision Booker as more of your third down type of a guy. And a good thing about Royce Freeman is, he had a lot of hype, I want to say, his junior season. And I was kind of cooled on him. And then when I finally dove into the tape this year, it's like, you know what, this guy is solid. He's solid like I think a guy like Nick Chubb is solid, where there's nothing overly spectacular about their game, but they just don't lose yards. They gain yards. They got good vision, good skill set, good all-around game. I think when you pair him with Booker, along with the assortment of weapons they've added in the draft, I think the Broncos did an excellent job drafting. He's going to do fine as a pro.
Let's flip over to the glamour position, also known as the quarterback, a position that I think in some ways causes a lot of guys to get overrated, like we saw with 4 quarterbacks going in the top 10. Emory, history tells us that these guys are not all going to work out. History tells us that typically less than 50% of these quarterbacks actually pan out. So of those 4, who are the guys that you think actually have a chance to pan out, who are drafted in the top 10, that being Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, and Baker Mayfield?
You know what? I think Darnold, because he has a little bit of that it factor, he's able to get out of trouble with his legs and does a good job of keeping plays alive. So I think he would be the one out the 4. I think the biggest bust clearly is going to be Josh Allen because he hasn't been successful at any level. He's played at JUCO or at Wyoming, and there's been a lot of excuses made for him and for his play. And at some point, you just got to play ball. And when you're out there with guys that are a half a tick faster, a half a tick more athletic, corners have a bit more ball skills than what you saw in the Mountain West Conference, you're going to struggle. And I think that's why it was just mind-blowing that teams mortgage future picks to trade up to get him. I just feel bad for Buffalo because they made that investment in him. And when you look at the rest of that roster, outside of Shady McCoy and maybe the tight end position, they're going to be bad this year. They may have the first pick next season.
I would argue that of all the quarterbacks, and I mean the entire draft this year, the guy who went to the best situation is Lamar Jackson with the Ravens. Marty Mornhinweg, the offensive coordinator, worked with Michael Vick. James Urban, the quarterback coach, worked with Vick and McNabb. You have a guy in Greg Roman on that staff who worked with Colin Kaepernick. He literally is surrounded with people who understand how to maximize his skill set. And oh, by the way, after 2018, Joe Flacco, that contract can be moved on from. There's no more guaranteed money. I feel like this may have been a blessing in disguise for Lamar's career.
Absolutely, and he's quite honestly the best quarterback of this class. I graded him out as a 90. My next best quarterback was Sam Darnold, who had a 79.5. So that's the talent difference I feel as though is between Lamar Jackson and all those guys that went ahead of him. And this is the part that people forget. You still got to play the preseason games. So when you put Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, and Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen in the game against backups with backup linemen and backup players, If things are not perfect, they will probably struggle. But you put Lamar Jackson in the game with backups, and he's clearly the best talent. He's going to wow. He's going to have a lot of splash plays, both running and also passing the football. So to me, if Baltimore is sitting there saying, well, we're already paying Joe Flacco, we might as well, and this guy is making all these plays, it's going to be hard to keep Lamar Jackson on the bench when he's out there playing against backups and shining like we know he will.
Well, here's the scenario I have, and before we move forward, I can see a scenario where Joe Flacco gets injured like week 4 or 5 because he gets hit by a blindside hit. RG3 comes in, goes like 5-0 off the bench. Flacco tries to come back, and he can't get his job back. And then you have next year, you go in with RG3 and Lamar Jackson for 2019.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, man. It's another situation to keep an eye on. I think they will probably move on from him. Is out here in New York with the Jets, Sam Darnold and Teddy Bridgewater. If Bridgewater proves to be healthy and competent, they may get rid of Josh McCown and keep Bridgewater as the starter until he gives way to Sam Darnold, or they may keep all three and get rid of the 2 other guys, which they probably will do anyway, or they may keep one of the guys, perhaps Bryce Petty, and look to trade Bridgewater before the season. So that'll be something to keep an eye on because Bridgewater is a former first-round pick, highly successful quarterback, led his team in the playoffs, and people think just because he has a knee injury, he's chopped liver, when Sam Bradford has had multiple knee injuries and continues to get contract after contract after contract.
Speaking of guys getting more and more opportunities, you mentioned Sam Bradford. That situation with Bradford and Rosen in that quarterback room is going to be interesting because Bradford basically has been stealing money for the entirety of his career. The guy can't stay healthy. And now he's got a quarterback behind him who you could argue was one of the most hungry players in this draft. How long is it going to take the Cardinals to realize that they drafted a guy who isn't going to sit around and wait for his shot?
Well, that's the thing, because the sad part is before Bradford got hurt, he was playing great football with Minnesota, and that gave way to Case Keenum. And so we'll see if Bradford can stay healthy. I know that's a big if. He was playing great. Now you put him in a situation where he has a David Johnson who also needs to stay healthy. He has a Larry Fitzgerald. He has 2 good young receiving options, and Christian Kirk and also Chad Williams from Grambling, whom they drafted last year. So there's enough pieces around there for him to be successful, but that's like banking on him. We haven't seen him stay healthy for a full 16-game slate. So we'll see Josh Rosen at some point in the season because I think in the preseason, he'll outplay the current backup in Mike Glennon and take that number 2 job.
The final quarterback I want to touch on with you is Mason Rudolph. What makes him potentially different than when the Steelers drafted, like, for example, Landry Jones or Josh Dobbs? What makes Mason Rudolph potentially their quarterback of the future, whereas the other guys haven't been able to fulfill that role?
I don't see him as a quarterback of the future. I honestly tweeted this out when they selected him. I feel like he's the same guy as Landry Jones. They're both tall, not overly athletic, put up a gang of numbers in the Big 12, but when pressure situation hits, they tend to fold. In every big game Oklahoma State played in, when they needed to win the game to maintain playoff aspirations, they lost, whether that's against TCU, whether that's against Oklahoma, whether that's against West Virginia. Mason Rudolph continuously came up small. So I don't see this as a quarterback of the future. I know some teams talked about, we're going to take him in the first round, but we've already seen the NFL not know what it's doing as far as evaluating quarterbacks. I would honestly take a guy like Kyle Waletta over him that have him graded way higher than Mason Rudolph, or even J.T. Barrett. At least I know J.T. Barrett, he may not be the most accurate guy or best passer, but I know he won't fold in a big game. So I've seen him win big bowl games. He won one this past January against USC, where he played some good football, and he's won multiple Big Ten championships. Mason Rudolph hasn't won a thing. He's no different to me than Luke Falk.
Talking with Emory Hunt here on the Mutant Blitz podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan. A lot of great analysis over there before and after the drafts, as well as during the college football and NFL seasons. Emory, let's jump over to the wide receivers. One of my favorite wide receivers in this draft. I got so excited when he went there because I just got big-eyed thinking about all the things he can do in that offense. and that's DJ Moore going to play with Cam Newton. I think this could be a marriage made in heaven because I think DJ Moore, he doesn't get it the credit he should because he played at Maryland, whereas I think if he would have played at a school like Ohio State, he would have been much more highly lauded.
Well, to his credit, he also played with like 15 different quarterbacks, one of which was a former linebacker that they had to move back to the offensive side of the ball just to have a quarterback because everybody got hurt this past season and even last season. For me, Moore is more along. He's not a guy that's going to get separation. You know, he's a 6'4", 230-pound receiver in a 5'10", 215-pound body. You know, he doesn't really particularly have great routes. Like I said before, doesn't get separation, but he does win the 50-50 contested catch more often than not. And he's the type of guy that's a really good receiver after the catch. So you get him a little short pass, and he turns to a running back. He's able to break tackle. So I'm gonna take the wait and see approach with this. Now he's a good player, and they are devoid of good players on the perimeter in Carolina. So that's a great pick. But I think there were better picks out there for me that could be a little bit more explosive and dynamic. But there's no downside to picking DJ Moore when your receiving core looks like it does in Carolina.
What are your thoughts on Calvin Ridley going to the Falcons? Can he really be the replacement that some of the quote-unquote experts are saying he's the replacement for Taylor Gabriel over there?
It's interesting. I was shocked that he fell that far. And for whatever reason, you always want to look at the Falcons receiving core and say, man, why is Mohamed Sanu holding down a number 2 spot? But for some reason, he always comes through and makes big plays, so you can't really get rid of Mohamed Sanu for whatever reason, even though you know deep down that he's not a great receiver, but he's there and he's consistent and he makes plays. So I think that's going to allow a guy like Calvin Ridley to finally play with a quarterback that can hit him accurately in stride down the field. He's going to be the direct beneficiary of that off coverage that he's going to see because teams are going to focus on Julio. Teams are going to focus on Sanu. So he's going to have his opportunity to win one-on-one battles. He can do that, and now he has a quarterback that can hit him in stride so that way he can have a lot of touchdowns.
The 49ers took Dante Pettis in the second round, but we saw a similar type of player in Tavon Austin who got traded on the third day of the draft. He wasn't able to translate as a 3-down receiver. Is Dante Pettis more than a dynamic kick punt returner?
I think he is. I still like Tavon Austin more because he's a little bit more explosive. But Pettis is probably a better, I would say, a more polished receiver. So he's going to a situation where they're going to have him run probably a lot of search routes, a lot of crossing routes, a lot of option routes, things of that nature, to where you can get the ball to him quickly. Then it turns to a punt return, and that way he can weave his way through traffic like he does or like he did at Washington. So I see a lot of that in this game. That's why I graded him out as a flanker. You want to keep him on the move, and when you add the benefit of him being a returner, it's just more value you're getting in the second round.
We talked about Lamar Jackson going to a great situation in Baltimore. Did any receiver go to a better situation than Christian Kirk, considering he gets to spend a year in the same locker room as Larry Fitzgerald?
Yeah, that's a great situation to be in because, you got the veteran, a guy that's the pro's pro, is going to show you the little nuances of how to play the position. He's not selfish in sharing his knowledge, so that's a great situation for him. But I think that the best situation possible is for two guys. You look at Cortland Sutton and Deshaun Hamilton, both going to the Denver Broncos, playing behind Emmanuel Sanders and also Demaryius Thomas. Those two guys will be primed and ready to take over in 2019 as the starters because, they're not going to see a lot of action this year. They're going to see some action because they're two tremendous players. But what a situation to be in where you really get to learn the system for a year, play a little bit, and take over the full reins next season and build that chemistry with a guy like Case Keenum.
How does a guy like James Washington from Oklahoma State fit into the Steelers' offense?
Perfect. I'm so glad they made that move, man. When you look at a guy like Martavis Bryant, who fantasy people love him because he catches touchdowns, but when you watch him as far as the technical part of playing a position, he doesn't have great hands. He doesn't run good routes. So all he is a one-trick pony. Now you add a polished route runner, a game breaker, a guy that's highly productive, and can play inside as well as playing on the outside, so he has that flexibility. To me, this is going to completely open up the Steelers' passing game because, now with the emergence of Juju Smith-Schuster, teams are going to focus on him. Teams are going to focus on Antonio Brown. So now you're going to have James Washington running polished routes over the middle of the field and being able to track the ball with the way he does. You talk about replacing a deep threat in Martavis Bryant with a better deep threat in James Washington. So I think he went to an ideal situation.
Let's flip over to the tight ends. I got to get your thoughts on the Eagles jumping ahead of the Dallas Cowboys to get Dallas Goedert. I mean, the kid was literally named because his father is a Cowboys fan, Dallas, and the Eagles jumped one spot ahead of the Cowboys to get him. Was it worth it for the Eagles to get Dallas Goedert?
Absolutely, because you look at how teams try to match up. Now teams try to find linebackers that can cover or smaller, strong safeties that can play in the box but can also cover. When you look at the Eagles' tight end depth chart with Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, Billy Brown as an H-back taking over for Trey Burton, it's going to be hard to find three guys on your defense that can match up with three athletic, movable pieces at tight end, guys that can also catch the ball and run like receivers. So it makes complete sense. Again, continues to transform their offense and makes them that much tougher to defend moving forward.
We know that Adam Gase, the coach of the Dolphins, has a history of making tight ends very productive weapons in his offense, whether it was in Denver, whether it was in Chicago, and now with Miami. Does Mike Gesicki just slide in, become that next weapon?
I think so, and I like how they paired him up with Durham Smythe out of Notre Dame, the blocking tight end, so that way you can keep Gesicki on the move and allow him to be that Jimmy Graham within that offense. Now, he's going to find his way open. He's going to make big-time catches inside the red zone. He's going to be a dynamic red zone target. You just hope that they found a quarterback in Ryan Tannehill. I know they keep saying, this year is going to be a year, one more year of grooming, but that's the biggest miss of their draft. They didn't take a quarterback, and they're going to hope that Ryan Tannehill is 100% ready to go because they've added a lot of weapons around him.
Is Mark Andrews going to the Ravens one of those value picks that we're going to look at years from now and wonder, how did this guy fall this far?
I think so because they actually made a better pick at tight end in the third round than they did in the first round. But they did get two of my highly graded tight end or H-back prospects because Hayden Hurst was my number 2 H-back and Mark Andrews was my number 2 inline tight end. So they definitely have to get better there. They whiffed on Max Williams out of Minnesota a couple years ago. Crockett Gilmore, I don't think he's on the team anymore. And the kid out of Delaware is more of a blocker, but he has been in and out of suspensions because of PEDs. So they have to get better at tight end. And I think that's how you help Joe Flacco. That's how you help RG3 and also Lamar Jackson, getting two guys that are really be good receiving options throughout the course of the season.
Let's jump over to the offensive line for a couple guys. Look, Colton Miller's got the size, and he looks like a great offensive lineman, but is he really going to develop into the tackle that the Raiders need to keep Carr upright?
If looks could kill, I would be an assassin, right? So, but you have to get out there and really perform. And Colton Miller, again, he was my 20th rated tackle. And to see him go in the top 10 screams combine jump, right? Where guys jump because of the athleticism but doesn't put it out on tape. You hope that he turns into the player that they expect him to be, drafting him in the top 10. But I just have a hard time seeing it, man. I feel bad for him because he didn't ask for it, but good for him because he's going to get top 10 money. But you want to see guys really be put in situations to succeed. He may not have to start, which would be great. But right now, you just hope that the rest of his game catches up to his athleticism.
One of my favorite also draft picks in this draft is actually on the offensive line. Will Hernandez going to the Giants just screams fit, does it not?
Yeah, they lucked up and got him in round 2. They almost lucked up and got Saquon Barkley and Lamar Jackson, which would have been deadly for the rest of the NFC East. But getting a guy that they wanted to get as far as to help their offensive line, especially on the interior, was huge because now you have, quote-unquote, satisfied the New York media as far as they need to get offensive line. Okay, well, we got a lineman, so now they can shut up. But they really got the premier player in Saquon Barkley who's going to supersede any average offensive line play. But I do like Henderson. Great pickup, and they also doubled down and got another great player in Lorenzo Carter, who was still sitting there in round 3.
Yeah, bad job by Chris Candy saying that he was from Clemson too. That was horrible.
Shout out to Chris Candy. That's my dog.
Another offensive lineman I'm very curious about what your thoughts are is Connor Williams from Texas. While I like him as a prospect, I'm kind of wondering what your perspective is. Is he going to project more as a guard or a tackle? Because he's still just under 300 pounds.
Yeah, I think he's probably more along the lines of a guard. I do like the fit going to Dallas because he doesn't have to start, so he can get acclimated to that pro system and those pro weights and pro nutrition, and really add that weight. But I think he's more of a guard. Even though I graded him out as a tackle, we'll see. I just didn't like I thought he didn't have that same, how can I put it, the same dog in him that you see from other linemen like a Quentin Nelson. I want to see a little bit more aggressiveness and nastiness in his game, and so we'll see if he's able to develop that as he gets down there in Big D.
Another guy that I'm not fully sure if he's a guard or a tackle is Matt Pryor, who was drafted by the Eagles. I mean, the dude is a massive human being at 6'7" and 350, but I'm not really sure. To me, I kind of think he's more of a guard than a tackle. What do you say?
He didn't make my list of prospects that I graded, so I had to really get caught up on him once he got drafted. And I think he's probably more along the lines of a tackle, but with the way they run their offense, guys are interchangeable. Guys can slide in and fill a need for a game or two. So he's going to be a swing player, kind of like Vaitai. I'm not even trying to pronounce the whole name, but Vaitai, how he played a little bit of that this year.
Just say Big V, you're safe.
Big V, there you go.
Let's jump over to the defense right now. Were you surprised to see the Saints trade up to get Marcus Davenport? And how do you see him fitting in to the Packers D? The Saints defense.
Yeah. I was shocked. Once you trade a first-round pick, I instantly thought the Saints were trading up to get Lamar Jackson. But they traded for, obviously, Marcus Davenport, which tells me that he better have 15 to 17 sacks this season, considering what they gave up for him. Now, what you like about him is that he does have the upside because he's still learning how to play with his skill set. Like, he has all of the raw tools, and he's a gamer. He was okay during the Senior Bowl week, but in the game, he actually balled out, I think, for the touchdown. So that's the type of player they're hoping that shows up each and every Sunday, and I like how they can utilize him in a specific role. They can play him off the ball because they do have Alex Okafor. They have Cameron Jordan. They still have Trey Hendrickson, whom they drafted last year. So they can get creative in how they put him along the defensive front or as a edge rusher if they go to different looks. So I like the move. I just didn't like the move up to get him because now you don't have that quarterback that was sitting there in Lamar Jackson to back up Drew Brees. You can't keep giving Drew Brees 2-year, $50 million contract.
The Colts have really used a lot of their picks on defense, and two of them were on defensive ends. Kemoko Turay of Rutgers and Tyquan Lewis of Ohio State. Do you think those were smart moves by them to get not just one but two defensive ends in the second round?
No downside in doubling your chances. I thought Tyquan Lewis was a decent guy. I wouldn't have taken him in the second round, but Turay, you heard a lot of hype about Turay, but when you go watch the film, you're trying to figure out which Turay they're talking about. Are you talking about the freshman year Turay or the last 3 seasons Turay? Because if they're talking about the last 3 seasons, not counting the last couple of games, then that's a reach in the second round. So we'll see. I just don't. I'm not as high on Turay as most were because he wasn't that guy consistently. I know he has athletic traits. So I just said the same thing about Marcus Davenport, but at least Davenport was actually productive, more so on a consistent basis than Turay.
2 straight years the Redskins draft defensive tackles from Alabama. Last year it was Jonathan Allen. This year it's Daron Payne. Is that turning out to be one of the more dangerous D-tackle combos in the NFL?
Absolutely. You add Tim Settle in there from Virginia Tech, and good luck trying to run the ball against the Redskins with that front 3. And they've quietly put together a tremendous roster and draft class. that's the team that's going to be vastly improved this year, especially on that side of the ball. I love their front seven. What they already have as edge rushers are excellent, but when you add Deron Payne, Tim Settle, along with last year's Jonathan Allen, my goodness, you're going to be tough to run the ball against.
The Giants later in the draft got R.J. McIntosh, and McIntosh was a guy that, I watch a lot of Miami football, and I felt like he had a lot of flashes, but, maybe he's a guy, if they don't ask him to do too much, he won't have too much pressure on him to develop too quickly. Do you see him more as a part-time D lineman or a down-the-down lineman?
I see him more as a utility player, and I was high on him. I gave him a 74.5 grade. He was my 6th rated defensive tackle. And going into that Giants defense, I like him more than the guy they drafted in B.J. Hill, actually. And I think when you look at those flashes in a NASCAR package in a unique situation where you know the team is going to throw the football, that's where he comes in. That's where he thrives.
Is Leighton Vander Esch the heir apparent now to Sean Lee in Dallas?
No, he's the heir apparent to Bobby Carpenter. That's the pick that I don't even understand. When you watch him play, you just you're waiting for that's why people are talking about him. And everybody's saying, oh, watch the Oregon game. Watch the Oregon game. You got to watch the Oregon tape. Well, if you're a first-round pick, I should be able to pull up any tape, and you should flash. I shouldn't have to pull up the Oregon tape. And a lot of times when you watch him play, you're seeing other guys making plays. It looks like someone else's highlight tape or something. So I'm not as high on him as most. For Dallas' sake, you better hope he turns into the next Brian Urlacher, because right now he's kind of looking like Bobby Carpenter.
Rashaan Evans, were you surprised that he got to the Titans where they did at 22?
Absolutely, because the Cowboys took a guy that was a worse player, in my opinion, in Vander Esch, and they could have landed Evans, who was still on the board, and that would have been a tremendous pick for them, solve the need, and a guy that can play any one of the 3 backer spots. So Titans got themselves a real good football player. They went back-to-back at the second level. They got better in the draft at linebacker.
When I saw Roquan Smith get drafted by the Bears, all I could think of was, so we go from Butkus to Singletary to Urlacher to Smith. It's like this franchise is just blessed with great linebacking history.
Yeah, he's a really good football player. In my mock draft, I gave him to the Bears because I know a lot of people were saying he was going to get to Raiders, but I just couldn't see him getting past Chicago, who needed an inside linebacker, an impact player. I was like, this would be tough to pass up, whether it was fantasy with my mock draft or in real life. And lo and behold, it played out perfectly because he's going to be a day one starter, good sideline speed, and a guy that doesn't miss many tackles.
How do you see the Buffalo Bills utilizing Tremaine Edmonds in their defense?
I hope they don't think he's an edge rusher. I like him as an inside backer, a guy that can play sideline to sideline. If you want to use him as a weak side backer, you can. Because he does a good job in chasing away the run play. And at that size, at 6'4", 250, you put him on the inside, you got a guy that can take away passing windows in the passing game because of that length. So I hope they don't think he's, a sack artist, because that's not his game. He's more of a traditional linebacker who just happens to be 6'4", 250. But the good thing about it is that you like that he's 19 years old, so he has a lot of growth left in his game.
I'll be honest with you, Emory. I was very disappointed that Shaquem Griffin dropped all the way to the 5th round. I thought this kid should have been, at worst, a day 2 draft pick. And seeing him drop to the 5th, I know he's a positive kid, but you and I both know that if it wasn't for him missing one hand, this kid should have potentially even been a first-round pick, because he's a football player. He is a guy who goes after the ball.
You love his motor, you love his acceleration, and, he does make those impactful plays. He makes more plays than – I keep banging on him because it's so true. He does make more plays than Leighton Vander Esch. He shows up more on tape, and that's what you want. I want to put on the tape of a prospect that has a name and not know who he is until he shows himself by making plays. That's the type of guy that Shaquem Griffin is.
How do you see the Seahawks using him in their defense?
I think he's going to be like Bruce Irvin. He's going to be a pressure player. So obviously he's going to start on special teams, but this is a guy in certain situations you want him out there because of his relentlessness, his acceleration, closing speed to the quarterback or ball carrier. And I think that's the type of role he can have. He's going to be a spot player, until he proves he can handle a full load as a starter. But as a spot player, conserving that energy is going to be key.
Let's jump to the secondary. The Packers took not one but two cornerbacks, Jair Alexander along with Josh Jackson. I could argue that those are two very different cornerback prospects.
Absolutely. For me, Jair Alexander is a field corner and Josh Jackson is a slot corner. So, yeah, you're right. You take two guys because they don't play the same position. I think he's best suited as a slot. Talk about Josh Jackson. I see him as an outside guy. I think he has the great skill set, but he has the great ball skills and instinct. So you want him kind of like in space to make plays on the ball. But Jair Alexander, you can find him on your best wide receiver, man him up, press him at the line, and take away that option in the passing game. He's a tremendous corner.
Is there a bit of irony that Mike Hughes got drafted by the Vikings, especially since Terrence Newman's going to be playing one more year in Minnesota? In some ways, you could say they're similar corners.
Yeah, he was my number one corner in this draft class. And, when I look at Hughes, I see a guy that can play inside, can play outside, great in the return game. Like you mentioned, he's similar to Terrence Newman. And what he can do, he's a great athlete, great ball skills, and good football IQ. That's exactly what you want. And he's also not afraid to run up and make a stop in a running game. So people were arguing with me back and forth saying he's not going to be a first-round pick. He's more of a second-round player. And here's the Vikings doing what the Vikings do, draft great defensive players and put them right in their defense and let them just wreak havoc on opposing offenses.
I'm a little biased, but I really like Dante Jackson from LSU. How do you see the Panthers utilizing him more as an inside or outside corner?
Whatever they see fit and whatever the matchup dictates, because he's an excellent matchup corner. He's fast in all directions. He can play tight press coverage and mirror and match because of his speed and acceleration and his quickness. Now, the only downside is that he can't catch. However, when you look at how he's able to stay in the hip pocket receivers, both in the slot and on the outside, both field and boundary, you can't go wrong with a guy like that on your defense. I love his potential. If he could just live in front of the jugs machine and start converting at least 50% of those interception opportunities, he'll have double-digit picks in the league.
How surprised are you that Derwin James dropped all the way to 17?
Very surprising, especially he got past Tampa Bay. He got past Oakland. You're just like, wow, this is a guy that really fell in the draft, but he lands in the perfect spot. Thought that was a great fit. He's another one of these move players. You could match him up with bigger receivers or tight ends, or have him play deep third or played in as an overhang defender. So he's a good matchup piece, good first-round talent. The Chargers got themselves a gem.
Is Justin Reed one of the great value picks in this draft, considering he dropped all the way to the third round to the Texans?
I think so, because, again, we're sticking with the theme of matchups and matchup players. He can play corner or safety, and that's what you want nowadays in the NFL. You want to have personnel out there on the field that doesn't have to change. And when you got a guy like Justin Reed there, in addition to guys like Derwin James and company, that keeps you in your base defense, keeps you in great football position as far as matchups are concerned. And I love his ball skills as well. So I think that was a great pickup by the Texans.
All right, so before I let you go, Emory, who are some of your winners and losers of the 2018 NFL Draft?
I think the biggest winner is the Denver Broncos. You talk about a team that bypassed the quarterback position because they signed Case Keenum. They added two of the premier options at receiver. They had a really good running back in Royce Freeman, a really good tight end, Troy Fumagalli. Oh, by the way, they also got a premier edge rusher in Bradley Chubb. And they were able to get Josie Jewell, the linebacker that does a great job in coverage, out of Iowa. So they've gotten better across the board. That's going to be a team to be reckoned with. And I also think a team that didn't do as well, I look at they've done better, I feel as though, in the undrafted free agent department, and that's the Dallas Cowboys. I love some of the picks they made. Gallup is a great receiver. Williams can move around or what have you, but I thought they did a really good job in the undrafted free agent market, which helps out their draft class. But as far as, loser, I don't want to say, a loser, but I was very disappointed with the Cowboys and what they were able to do in the first round.
Follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan. Emory Hunt does an excellent job, not just giving you information about the NFL draft, but covering college football and the NFL. And, of course, I have him throughout the season on my show, Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. Emory, appreciate the time, and I'm still a little jealous that you got to go to the draft instead of me.
Don't worry about it, man. It's a marathon, not a sprint. definitely not for the faint of heart. You would have been knocked out after round 2. So, but I appreciate you having me on.
All right, take care of yourself. So instead of doing a 6-pack of topics this week, I'm going to give you my 6 takeaways from Marvel's Avengers Infinity War. This review will have spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie yet or you don't want to hear certain information, it's your chance to jump off the boat. But if you're invested and you want to know, here we go. My first takeaway from Avengers Infinity War is how well the movie dealt with Thanos and the complex and intricate levels involved in who Thanos is and the type of individual that he is and why he's doing what he's doing. I know in some ways it's sacrilegious to some comic book hardcore fans that they didn't go with the original premise of the comics like Infinity Gauntlet and Infinity War and Infinity Quest. But what you did get from the movie was Marvel Studios gave you a villain in Thanos that you could not just understand where he is coming from, but you could absorb how powerful and how dangerous he was. And they did it at the very beginning of the movie because they showed you Thanos going head to head with the Hulk and how the Hulk got his punches in, but when Thanos got the upper hand, he finished the job and he beat the Hulk down. And it was even so bad that when Bruce Banner kept trying to get the Hulk to come out later in the movie, the Hulk almost seemed like he was scared. So in doing that, you're showing how physically able Thanos is from the very start of the movie. And then you see later as the movie progresses how he talks to Gamora, how he deals with Doctor Strange, how he gives the snide remark to Thor that, you should have gone for the head, not for the chest, when he attacked him with Stormbreaker. Thanos is more than just another powerful bad guy with bad intentions. He was a guy who had been planning this for a long time. And in presenting Thanos that way, it allows him to be more than just another villain. It allows you to understand that when he gets his way, it's going to be more than just another problem to deal with. And I think that's one of the reasons why Tony Stark was left as one of the people alive in the movie. Because when you get to Avengers 4, someone has to avenge what Thanos did. And it might as well be the guy who was on the front line of almost defeating him. I think that you're going to see in Avengers 4 Thanos not be as much of a centralized character, but as more of part of the bigger picture of the movie. And whereas the Avengers Infinity War is going to be, the apex of what you get from Thanos. And look, Thanos, he's intelligent, he's got physical abilities, he understands what he's dealing with. And also, they mentioned earlier in the movie that one of his members of the Black Order had said to him, no one has ever been able to hold multiple Infinity Stones at the same time and control them. So it's more than just Thanos is powerful and able and smart, and it's that he literally is something that the heroes of Earth and the Guardians and all these people have never ever faced before. And that's part of the reason why, and again I mentioned spoilers earlier, that's why they had to lose. Because the heroes of Earth, Avengers, Earth's mightiest heroes, had to be shown that if they don't work together, they're not just going to have to be able to defeat Thanos, but they're going to have trouble against a lot of villains. And whoever the next major villain is in phases 4 and 5 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this is going to show you that if they don't work together, they're not going to be able to defeat Thanos. How would they be able to defeat anybody else moving forward who is as dangerous or more dangerous than Thanos? My second takeaway from Avengers Infinity War was that I really like how they finally have cleaned up Thor's story arc in a way the comics never did. You know, in the comics, the character of Thor, it's such a sloppy mess because they don't give you the whole origin of Thor Odinson from the start. In the comics, they give you this idea that different people have picked up the hammer of Thor and they've been imbued with the power of Thor. Not that they are actually Thor Odinson, the person. They just happen to have the power of Thor. So you went for about 40 years of comic book history with one understanding of Thor, to later find out there's a whole nother story about Thor, the son of Odin from Asgard. And then, of course, you had the Ultimate Universe's Thor, where he didn't know who he really was. You had the multiple rewritings of Thor in the 2000s. But what the movies have done is they've given you a much more cleaned up, straightforward version of Thor. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I like the fact that they had him go get a new hammer. This time it's going to be an axe that they called Stormbreaker. And they say it, you know, this is unlike any other weapon you've ever wielded. This can control the Bifrost. This is a weapon that can kill Thanos. And he actually almost does kill Thanos, which leads you to believe that Thor may be the guy to defeat Thanos if it comes down to that in Avengers 4. And I know we're getting conflicting information about, you know, what exactly Avengers 4 is going to be about, but there is still going to be a moment where the heroes are going to have to deal with the aftermath of what Thanos did, whether that's directly having another confrontation with him, dealing with him having all the Infinity Stones, whatever it is, they're going to have a showdown with Thanos again, and Thor may be the key to beating him because, as you saw, he almost killed Thanos near the end. And I think that is an interesting prelude for the next Avengers movie. My third takeaway from the Avengers Infinity War is one of the most obvious takeaways, which was the post-credit scene when Nick Fury sends out the page for help from Captain Marvel. Now, we will see the Captain Marvel movie next year. That will be the movie that comes out right before Avengers 4 comes out. And again, this is significant because the Captain Marvel movie is set in the 1990s. So there is this gap between the 1990s and now. We are assuming that there is a 20 to 28 year gap between the end of Captain Marvel, the movie, and Avengers Infinity War happening. So we know up front that Captain Marvel, Kevin Feige's already said she's going to be the most powerful hero that they have ever introduced to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So there's obvious reasons why you have to have a time period piece, because one, it allows you to introduce a hero that is pre the era of superheroes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe's historical timeline, and two, it explains why Nick Fury has a pager to get a hold of her. You also have to wonder if he's sending her a page when this is happening. Did Nick Fury and her discuss that this could happen? Which makes you wonder, are there Infinity Stones involved in Captain Marvel? Because for Nick Fury to see Maria Hill disappear the way she did, and then he start disappearing the way he did, you have to think, did he and Captain Marvel have a conversation that led to them saying, if this situation happens, call me? And so I have to think that page is more than just an SOS. It was more than just a cry for help. That there is something in the Captain Marvel movie that suggests that what happened in Infinity War might happen, and that they may need her to come help them when that time comes. My fourth takeaway from Avengers Infinity War is that you're getting some of your heroes back. I know some of the directors are saying that some of the deaths in the movie are real. And that may confuse people because they say, well, you can't keep Spider-Man and Black Panther and all these characters dead. Correct. You can't keep them dead. Because there's a possibility they're not dead. Remember, Spider-Man didn't say, I'm afraid to die. He said, I'm afraid to go. I think there's a possibility that when Thanos snapped his fingers, that he didn't kill off half the universe. He sent half the universe to what is known as Soul World, an entire dimension that is housed inside the Soul Stone. So all the characters that you saw disappear at the end of Infinity War, Black Panther, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Peter Quill, that all of those characters are not dead. They're just trapped in Soul World. And in Thanos' mind, he vanquished all of them, but instead he just sent them to Soul World. Because remember, who did he see after he snapped his fingers? He saw Gamora. He was in the Soul Stone talking to her. So I think that all these people are trapped in this other dimension, and it's going to take Tony Stark or Captain America or Nebula or somebody getting them out of Soul World, and that's how you're going to get all your heroes back. So if all these characters are trapped in Soul World and they're not actually dead, it's going to be a lot easier to bring our heroes back, quote unquote, to life, to the movie screen, than having to undo the dead. And I think that's a whole different conversation, because now if we're talking about just having to undo what Thanos did, we're not, bringing people back from the dead. We're just bringing people back from another dimension. And I think that's maybe where Doctor Strange comes in, because if Doctor Strange, who, remember, he was the last person to have the Time Stone, he already has a connection with one of the Infinity Stones. So if he's trapped in Soul World along with all these other characters, maybe he's part of the way of getting them out of Soul World. He has knowledge and understanding of alternate dimensions. So this may not be just a, let's bring in the most powerful person we can to fight Thanos. This may be a multifaceted effort by multiple heroes to fix what Thanos did and move forward, while also defeating him and not letting him do any more harm to the universe. While I say certain heroes are going to come back, we saw Thanos kill certain people, literally murder them, and I think those people are not coming back on the contrast. So while I do think we are going to see the return of Black Panther, we're going to see the return of Spider-Man, we're going to see the return of Doctor Strange and other characters, Loki, Heimdall, Gamora, they're done. They're gone. They are not coming back. And they may not be the only heroes that we see perish before Phase 4 really gets underway. There is still a possibility that other heroes will die in Avengers 4. You heard me talk about it for weeks here on the podcast about Chris Evans and his contract. Well, guess what? Chris Evans' contract is still expiring. Either Steve Rogers is going to retirement or he is going to die. The Russo brothers didn't put that picture out of Bucky Barnes with Captain America's shield for no good reason. That was obviously a foreshadowing of something. We know for sure that there's already scheduled plans for Guardians of the Galaxy 3. There are plans for Spider-Man 2, for Black Panther 2, for Doctor Strange 2. So we know that all of those movies are going to happen. There is nowhere where it says that there is another Steve Rogers Captain America movie or another Iron Man movie with Robert Downey Jr. playing Tony Stark. We're seeing that their end may not have come in Infinity War, but it may come next year. Now, whether that means they go off into retirement or they actually die in the movie, I'm not fully sure yet. But there's going to be something. Remember, Pepper Potts told him, as long as you have that on your chest, how are we going to settle down and have a family? Well, maybe Tony Stark retires. Maybe he takes the plate off his chest and he says, I'm done saving the world. And Stark has said in other movies that he was still worried about what could be coming. And Thanos, what he was worried about, he just didn't have a specific name or timetable or anything like that for when exactly it was going to happen. So I do think that we are not going to see the end of heroes dying in Avengers 4, but I do think that there are certain people that they are done, and that is Heimdall, who, great job by Idris Elba playing the character over the years. Loki, played by Tom Hiddleston. Tom did a great job, probably one of the best character portrayals I've ever seen in comic book movies. Gamora, I know she was very popular. She's no longer in the picture. And of course, you can't forget about the Vision, who is also the voice of Jarvis, who was played by Paul Bellamy. And while it's sad, it's also time. You can't keep these characters around forever. These actors do want to go off and do other things with their time. They want to invest their time into other projects. So I totally understand why they're doing it that way. My fifth takeaway from Avengers Infinity War is who wasn't there. Hawkeye and Ant-Man were not involved in Infinity War. And I think there's two reasons for that. I think the first reason was because you don't want to take away from the Ant-Man and the Wasp movie coming out this summer. You've already started building this whole storyline for Scott Lang's Ant-Man. You've already began all this work on bridging Hank Pym and S.H.I.E.L.D. before the 1990s to the modern day. And we've already talked about the quantum realm. We've already talked about the different things that Scott Lang can do as Ant-Man and Goliath, or Giant Man, whatever reference you want to use. So now we get to build on that more. We get to build on what happened after Scott Lang's appearance in Captain America's Civil War. And I think that if you would have put Ant-Man in Infinity War, it would have taken away from that storyline. I think there were a lot of people who wanted to know, well, what is the next thing for Ant-Man? We already got teased about Evangeline Lilly becoming the Wasp. The Marvel Universe is going to be going on beyond 2018 and 2019. You know, when we're done with this whole story arc that was started by Iron Man 10 years ago, Captain America, Thor, the Hulk, Avengers 1, all the things that were involved with those characters and those movies and those storylines, we're going to be moving on to the next phase of character story arcs as the central characters, and building more depth to Ant-Man in his own movie was very important to that. I think that's part of the reason why Ant-Man and the Wasp are getting their own movie this summer. And if you watch the trailer, you see that there's a good amount going on there. You know, we're talking about the quantum realm. We're talking about villains who want to manipulate and use Hank Pym's technology. We get to get more in depth into Hank Pym's past, Scott Lang's present and his future, his relationship with Evangeline Lilly as the Wasp, his partner. This allows them to bring Ant-Man in to Avengers 4 and kind of be like, hey, listen, I know I missed out on things that happened in Infinity War, but I'm here to help you now with this problem. And you know what? Maybe their experiences with the quantum realm in Ant-Man and the Wasp will help them in dealing with the aftermath of Thanos from Infinity War. I think Hawkeye not being there also is interesting, because what if when Thanos snapped his fingers, something happened to Hawkeye's family? You know, they kept saying, oh, Hawkeye went into retirement. Hawkeye is with his family. Well, what if something happens to his family and he's out for vengeance? What if something happened to his wife or his kids when Thanos snapped his fingers, and Hawkeye just shows up and says, I'm here to bring my family back. What are we going to do about it? You know, I think that is much more impactful than Hawkeye just being on the front lines and possibly getting faded out at the end of Infinity War with a bunch of the other characters. Now you can bring him in, and he can show up at the beginning of Avengers 4, and he can be saying, you know, what the is going on? I just lost my family. What are we going to do to bring my family back? I think that's going to be a pretty cool side to see, angry Hawkeye. And you wouldn't have gotten that in Avengers Infinity War. You can get that now in Avengers 4. So two definitely characters we're going to see appear in Avengers 4 who were not in Infinity War, aside from Captain Marvel. And I think that's where we can start reshuffling the deck. You know, your new Avengers team is probably going to be comprised in a world after Avengers 4. We're talking about a new Avengers team of Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Ant-Man, the Wasp, And we know that Sebastian Stan has multiple movies still on his contract after this year. So he's probably going to become either the new Captain America or a modified version of Winter Soldier. I don't know what the future holds for Scarlett Johansson, Natasha Romanoff, or Hawkeye, Jeremy Renner, but both of them may go in retirement after that movie as well. I talked about the possibility of Tony Stark going into retirement if they don't kill him off in Avengers 4. So there's a lot of variables, a lot of different ways they can do this, but I do think that you are definitely setting a grandiose stage to bring in these characters in Avengers 4 and truly avenge for what Thanos did to the universe. My sixth takeaway from Avengers Infinity War is when you look at the big picture of Marvel, it's amazing how far we've come with Avengers Infinity War. You know, it was 10 years ago today. This is on Wednesday, May 2nd. Today is the date of the release of the first Iron Man. And I find it very fascinating that they allowed 10 years to build to this crescendo, to this massive event, this massive moment. And I know in some ways when they first started this journey, they didn't fully plan for this to happen. But a few years in, they took the big step in building, saying Iron Man 1 was successful, Iron Man 2 is successful, we got something going here, let's build to Avengers and see what happens. And I think that's when they realized with the first Avengers movie, they can keep building and growing this universe. And as a result, you saw with time how expansive it has gotten, how huge it has gotten. And while a lot of other movie franchises and television franchises have become very impatient with their storylines and their character development, Marvel has stayed the course, and they've been able to stay the course because they have the backing of Disney's money behind them. They've also stayed the course because they realize that they're not just putting out movies for the sake of making money. They're giving an entire world exposure to something that they've never seen before. Things that people like myself and other comic book readers got to read about, got to experience for 60, 70 years of comic book history, you're getting condensed, cleaned up, and presented to you in a nice, neat, tight package of films. And now we're approaching the 20th Marvel movie, and every one of them has been quality. And you could argue the worst one of the last 10 years was The Incredible Hulk, with Edward Norton playing Bruce Banner / Hulk. And that was really a blip on the radar more so than anything else, because overall, Marvel has had full control and full creative licensing over every film in this 10-year run. And they've picked the right actors, they've picked the right storylines, they've picked the right interwoven connections. And I'm very excited for what the future has, because I know for some people, it's going to be sad when Steve Rogers and Tony Stark and Natasha Romanoff and Hawkeye and all these other characters eventually go away. I know for a lot of people, when I went to the theater, I heard people gasp when they saw Heimdall and Loki get killed. But that's part of the evolution of a storyline in comics, is you invest so much in these characters, you love these characters, and then one day they're no longer there. You could argue Anthony Hopkins as Odin was one of the best castings in all the Marvel Universe. Well, he's no longer there. This is part of the evolution and the development, and like the comics, right now it's 2018. In 2028, when we're having another conversation about the 20-year mark of Marvel, they may decide to reset the universe and cast all new actors and actresses to play all these roles, because that's the way comics work. There's a lot of different ways that Marvel can go in this era after this first 10 years, especially with bringing in the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. It may also be in 2028. We may look back on 2018 and say, wow, look how far we've come with our special effects, with acting, with storylines, that nobody really is worried about bringing back Tony Stark or Steve Rogers. But Infinity War gave the entire world an idea of what comic book readers got to experience over decades of comics within a 10-year period now. This is the roller coaster, the character development, the creating an entire world that you identify with these characters and these people on multiple levels. And that's what's the beauty of what Marvel Cinematic Universe has done. It has given the mainstream viewer the comic book experience condensed in nice, neat package that comic book readers took 60 to 70 years of reading comic books to experience. And I think that's the beauty of this. And now when you talk to people, they understand why the hardcore geek like myself loves comic books, because these are characters and people and experiences and situations that are not just fun and exciting and an escape, but they're also characters and people that you can identify with. Thanks for listening to this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz podcast. I know it's a little bit different what we've been doing for the last few weeks, but I really wanted to get into the NFL drafts. I want to thank Emory Hunt again for joining me in this week's podcast. And I also want to dive deeper into Avengers Infinity War. Thanks again for checking out the podcast this week. If you're new to the channel, hit that like and subscribe button if you liked what we brought to the table this week. I'm sure you can catch our content each and every week on the Mutant Blitz podcast, where we touch on some of the hot topics from the world of sports and comic book television and movies. If you have any thoughts on this week's podcast about the NFL draft or Avengers Infinity War, drop a comment in the section below to give us some feedback. And thanks again for listening to the Mutant Blitz podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hennig. Catch you next week.